Welcome to the Joy Podcast. My name is Stacey Harkey. I am here. I was gonna give a list of like my resume, but then I was like, I don't.
TikTok sensation.
Yeah, that's what I want to leave with. And I'm here with my dear friend and director of Equality Utah, Troy Williams.
Hey, thanks for having me on your show.
It's so exciting. You were like the first one I thought of.
I feel very touched. I'm very moved. Yes.
Tell us, give us a little taste. What is Equality Utah? Before we go in, people are like, when is it?
Right, yeah. Equality Utah is the state's LGBTQ political advocacy organization. Oh, yeah, I know. Okay. Sexy.
You've done a lot of good in Utah, especially, right?
I think so. Yeah, the organization's like 21 years old, and we go up to Capitol Hill, and we're just legal now. We go up to Capitol Hill, and we make sure that the laws in our state include and protect the LGBTQ community and our families.
Yes.
See, like that, my little elevator pitch?
I love it. Yeah. I was going to say
I got it down.
I'm going to butcher it.
After 8 years, I got it down.
So what, and I was just telling Troy this, but one thing I love for everyone who's listening, I want to focus on the aspect of joy.
Okay.
As we move forward, and obviously being part of the LGBTQ plus community, there's so many heart-wrenching, heartbreaking stories, and those are so valid.
Yeah.
But also there's a lot of stories of joy, and sometimes the process of getting there is heartbreaking and heart-wrenching too. And sometimes we're working on getting there still.
Sometimes that's what brings the joy, right?
Ooh.
When you go through the pain of it all.
Okay, that sounds like save it for the finale.
Okay, all right.
But before we jump in, I want people to just get a chance to loosen up a bit. Let's just have a little bit of fun. And I have some questions for you, Troy. We're gonna play.
I am going to be vulnerable.
Oh, snaps!
Today, because Stacey's reading Brene Brown. And tells me this is the most important value I can bring to this interview. So here I am.
Important.
Let me open up.
I'm like,
a little bit.
If you're
I'm opening up.
Blubbering and bawling at the end of this, I didn't do it right. I didn't do it right.
I'm feeling very vulnerable right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But we're just going to play a game, so it's just to have fun and loosen up and feel more comfortable with each other. But the game I want to play, as just coined by Callie, is called Kiss, Marry, Ghost. Okay?
Oh, yes.
And we know the game, right? You playing with your friends.
Okay.
I'm going to give you 3 options. You have to choose which option you will kiss, which option you will marry, and which option you would ghost.
Yeah.
Never to be seen again.
All right.
Okay? Ready?
Yep.
First option. Okay. The iconic Spider-Man. We have Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland. Because you actually worked with Andrew Garfield. You know him really well.
Yes. Andrew is a friend of mine. So, I would have to say, I'm going to see him tomorrow. That I'm going.
You better not ghost him.
I'm not going to ghost him.
I mean, but if you did, it would be so good.
No. Andrew is as beautiful and sweet and kind as you would think
He's
is.
He's a gem.
Yeah, you've met him before. Yeah. So I'd marry Andrew Garfield.
Oh.
If he was straight. We've worked on this.
If he was straight?
Yeah, we've worked on it.
He's not straight?
Well, he says he's straight. But there was a time when we were driving the car and he accidentally drank out of my water bottle.
Uh-huh.
And then he was like, oh, I'll apologize. I'm like, oh, no, don't apologize. It's like we're basically married now. We were making out, and it's just the whole thing, yeah.
I love the idea of no, the pleasure is mine.
That's right.
I like you hoarding the water bottle. You never wash it.
Well, I left it in my car for months, yeah.
So much.
I know, yeah. So I would marry Andrew Garfield, and then it was Kiss. Well, Tom Holland is adorable, but he's probably too young for me to kiss.
Okay.
So yeah, I might kiss Toby.
Kiss Toby and ghost Tom Holland.
Might ghost Tom Holland because yeah.
Ooh,
that's hard though.
That is hard. I would probably Andrew Garfield is he's a lovely human being, so well-rounded. So I think I would marry Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
I would kiss Tom Holland.
Yeah.
He seems like he'd be fun.
Yeah.
And then I would ghost Tobey Maguire because, I don't know if he's going to be listening to this podcast.
It's possible.
But, he's great. Let's not dive in. Okay, another one for you. Kiss, marry, ghost. Okay. Utah, California, Idaho.
Ooh.
Which one would you kiss? Which one would you marry, and which one would you ghost?
Well, I'd probably marry California. I spent
you love California.
I spent a lot of time there. Yeah. And then I kiss Utah because I do love I love making out with Utah. And then Idaho, where my mom is from. And so I have family there. But
Ghost Idaho.
Yeah, I would probably Ghost Idaho.
I'd probably marry Utah.
Yeah.
I just feel like these are my roots. These are my people.
Yeah.
I love it. I'd probably kiss California. It seems like a good time, but I'm like, that's not my first time. And then Idaho, I am so sorry, but like, potatoes ain't gonna cut it for me.
No, not at all. It's the ocean aspect of California. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I feel
I do love Utah. Okay, one more.
Okay.
Okay, would you kiss, marry, or ghost the 70s, the 80s, or the 90s?
70s, 80s, or 90s. I was born in the 70s.
Okay.
Came of age in the 80s.
I'm like
and then went through hell in the 90s. So, because my 20s were a little bit messy. You know, trying to figure out the whole gay thing. So that was like a big nightmare. And I was like. We'll get into this, I'm sure, later, but that's when I was like, I was trying to come out, but I couldn't really do it, so I like joined the Eagle Forum.
And this was in the 80s, you were saying?
This is 90s.
The 90s.
The 90s, yeah.
Okay, so you were like in your 20s?
Yeah,
Let's just dive into this right now.
So I'm just gonna ghost the 90s.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna marry the 80s because that's when it was a cool time in the 80s. You know, I had like kind of new wave Flock of Seagulls hair.
I feel like you have
I had like a little glam gothy thing going on.
Energy.
Yeah, for sure. And like sort of British new wave music was very cool, and and then 70s, it was my childhood, so it was kind of this blissful.
So you were like kind of just like this before everything, before it all hit the fan.
That's right.
Tell me more about this. So you were saying in the 90s, it was kind of like that was like a really hellish period for you.
Yeah.
And now is that like? Yeah, tell me, it was like coming to terms with sexuality?
Yeah, so I returned from my LDS mission.
Woo, where'd you go?
To England.
Yes.
I know. And home of Andrew Garfield.
This theme better be carried
and
out
Tom
the whole
Holland.
episode.
And
not Tobey Maguire.
No, not Tobey Maguire. And then I was so afraid to be gay that I kind of sublimated all this kind of nascent emerging sexual desire into kind of right-wing politics. And so I joined the Utah Eagle Forum, which was, and so Gail Ruzicka, who's like the head of the Eagle Forum, is like the leading anti-gay crusader in the state. And so she became my mentor and kind of was training me how to be a lobbyist. And in the 90s, she was kind of a ferocious organizer. So, I mean, if she had a particular view on a piece of legislation, she could kill a bill just by sort of giving a glance.
Like really intense.
Yeah. She was a tenacious
like the
organizer. Team. Yeah. And so I thought to myself, well, if I am like super righteous and become like this turbo kind of Mormon and right wing advocate, then all this gay stuff will go away. And it doesn't, and it didn't. And so, but yeah, I think that's we fight against these things that are within us, and then we project it out to the world, right? And so I was. When you don't reconcile who you are and really come into your body and really own yourself, that kind of authentic wholeness of who you are, then you start to project it onto others and they become like this adversarial person to you, an enemy, a rival, something that must be vanquished because you're trying to vanquish it within yourself.
Right.
So then you go out in the world and try to vanquish it in others.
Yeah,
so,
you see some of the most intense voices sometimes.
Right.
Oh, they came out. What a surprise.
What are you hiding, dear?
Why are you so angry, boo-boo?
Right.
And I feel like that sometimes. So wait, how did you go from incredible, intense, right-wing pundit or whatever, or politician to where you are now with Equality Utah, leading as far as like Utah's LGBTQ protection?
Yeah. It's a journey. That's for sure.
I know this sounds like an intense question, right?
It's a great journey. It's a great journey of like personal discovery and really learning to love and accept myself. And there's so many stories that kind of led me there, and I could tell 1,000 of them. But there's just like little moments that I remember that are really kind of pivotal. I remember like driving down the street in Provo. I lived in Provo for a while.
Right.
And there was like this Indigo Girls song on the radio, and I remember like listening to it, and Amy and Emily from the Indigo Girls, they have this lovely kind of harmony, and their music is very, it speaks to the kind of pain of the human condition, and I remember like driving down the street, and this kind of realization hit me that two humans, which are both gay, I said, no one that can create such beauty could be despised of God. And it was like this moment of like, oh my gosh, and I had to pull over because my heart was pounding, and I was like, and I had this crying, I had this emotional moment of just realizing this kind of beauty that was coming from these two artists. And it had this really kind of profound moment. And then it wasn't like instantly like I pulled over, I'm like, I'm gay! But I'm
Rainbows
gay too.
Shooting out of your car.
Right. But it was
playing in the background.
But it was one of those moments that started to melt away the kind of ideas that I had about who gay people were and what their value was. And then once I recognized their beauty and could see the beauty of queerness, of queer artists, of queer people, then I could start to accept the beauty of it within myself.
So I love that.
Yeah.
I want to chase that thread. You brought up the thread that I want. I'm like, let's go. Let's dig in. We talk about that 90s for you being just like a very hellish period. You were like, it was hard. It was the torturous era. And did this kind of mark a shift? Like, I want to talk about this beauty, this queerness, this queer joy.
Yeah.
Did you experience it at that moment? I mean, I don't even know how you would define that. And I don't know. I don't have a definition for it, but I like the way it sounds. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, queer joy for me is often is when people create some kind of art that speaks to the human condition in a way that we can all resonate with. And I was thinking about that. Have you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yes,
right?
I love that movie.
Okay, so it has this kind of queer thread that goes through it, and it's this kind of wild sci-fi kung fu, like comic book, multiversal, crazy, absurdist, surrealist experience. But at the core of the film is the story of unexpressed love.
Oh,
right?
Interesting.
Packaged in this incredible story is the human story of unexpressed love. And when that love is not expressed, it becomes monstrous. And when we don't express love to people, they sometimes become our enemies. And so you have this, and I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't seen the show, the film yet, but that's really the essence of what that story is.
Yeah.
And then when we can sort of learn to express love to ourselves, the love about ourselves, then we can sort of express love to our family members and to the people around us.
And is that kind of like the joy and the queerness that you're talking about?
Yeah. And this is a queer narrative that is through this.
How does that look in your life? Like, are there moments you can think of? Is there a time when you're like, this is when I was feeling like this joy in my identity? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the first time I fell in love, I think is that experience, which is, like 20-some years ago. My first boyfriend.
What made that so joyful?
It was really, I think, a catalyst for me. One of the catalysts for me becoming like an advocate, an activist for right wing or for left wing. Rewind that. Cut this. Okay. So
keep it.
That love became really the catalyst for my advocacy for LGBTQ rights later down, because when I fell in love with my first boyfriend, I realized how beautiful and profound this thing was. This thing that everyone hated around me, and this is like 2 decades ago, right? So the social condition was, it was the
pressures were so different.
Yeah, I mean, like gay intimacy in Utah at that point was illegal. Woo. Okay, I mean, it wasn't until
I would have been arrested.
The Lawrence v. Texas, that would come after that. Where that this anti-sodomy laws became illegal.
Gotcha.
Right. And so everyone hated had this fear around queer intimacy, but when I felt it, it was so profound and so moving. I was like, this is worth fighting for. And my boyfriend at the time, he said to me something that I'd never heard before. So I'll back up a little bit and say that I had like this massive crush in college on this one boy, and it was like this huge, overwhelming, all-consuming kind of obsession almost.
I love crushes.
Right?
I was literally just talking to someone where it's like they like overtake you in a way that you can't, and I just like love it.
Right? You figure out what their path is in college, and you find ways to sort of like intersect accidentally, but then I remember this guy. one time he said to me, he goes, yeah, he said, if I could take a pill to make me straight, I would. And that was like this, and that like just like jolted me out of like my crush. It was like the crush was like over in that instant moment.
That's not what I thought.
Right.
It was. Yeah.
But then very quickly, I met my boyfriend, and then we started spending time together. And then what he said to me, he was like, yeah, and this was like sort of disconnected conversations, but he goes, yeah, if anyone could ever give me a pill to make me straight, I would never take it because I love being gay.
Oh, interesting.
And that was like this really powerful, profound moment for me. And I was like, yeah, it is great. It is cool.
Like, what's great about it? You know what I mean? Because like, I want anytime you're like, this was nice, I'm like, why? What's good about it? Tell me.
Well, again, dropping into your body and really dropping into your soul and your heart and really just being present there, and then just sort of authentically moving through the world in that space where you're not hiding from somebody, where you're not afraid of people's judgments of you, where you're not afraid to say your opinion, to be able to say, I think that person is hot or cute or, whatever. To be able to share your likes and your fears freely without fear of being shut down is joyful.
I think of, and like 100% spot on, I think of coming out, and there was one day after I'd been out for a little bit where I was like, you read those stories of like Harry Potter or those like superheroes that are like young and they have this amazing power and they're like, I don't want it. And you're like, why are you complaining? What do you mean you don't want it? And everyone thinks I'm going to be weird because I can fly and they can't. I'm like, you're such a freaking baby.
That's funny.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Like, 'cause I think one of the things that kept me alive when I was like a little kid was X-Men comics.
That was my jam.
Is that your jam?
The two things I prayed for growing up when I was in the closet was, I was like, God, please, I beg you, make me straight. Or give me X-Men powers and I'll be okay with that.
Is there a power you wanted?
I was just like, I'll take whatever. Just don't make me the blue monster, dude.
Yeah,
like,
the beast.
Yeah, beast. I was like,
so this is the thing. So mutants are like the metaphor, the queer metaphor is pretty obvious, right? So you have these kids when they hit adolescence, they develop these kind of powers, and it frightens the sort of world around them. And then it becomes this metaphor of fighting to protect this world that fears and hates you.
Yes.
And so they're working to sort of be able to assimilate and to be able to kind of connect with, to live in a society that's more peaceful and accepting. And that's the metaphor. And you can apply it, loosely to queer issues, to race issues, to some religious issues.
Anything that makes you feel or be perceived as a minority. Right?
You're the other, right? You're the outsider. Yeah, and so I think that those comics really wired me in a certain way to see the world as a young person. And then also that I think helped inform my advocacy as well, because if the world is harsh and is brutal towards you, and if there are people coming after you, then you have a responsibility. Getting back to Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield, with great power comes great responsibility. So it all ties back together, right? And so
I love it.
It all comes back to
it
all comes back to Andrew Garfield.
To every 2 points every time he gets peppered in.
Right. That we have a responsibility to take our gifts that we are given to make the world a better place.
And I think that is like an element of where, like, at least for me, where like happiness comes from. And back to that whole like superhero concept where it's like, why? I don't want to be a superhero. And you're reading it and you're like, shut up. This is the coolest thing.
You can fly, yeah.
I feel like that finally with like being queer and identifying as gay, where I'm like, man, I fought this for so long. And I was like, why? And now that I'm like just embracing who I am, it like, I feel it's like not just powerful, but I feel like enabled. I feel like hopeful. I'm experiencing like all these positive feelings and emotions that I didn't even know were an option because I was fighting them for so long, right?
Well, I always like this idea from the mythologist Joseph Campbell, who said that our demons are just gods that are not recognized yet. Right, and they're not recognized, and when we stuff our gods down and deny them, then they kind of come up and they act out in sort of destructive ways.
And God's being like part of who we are, kind of thing. These things, these powerful parts of us.
Exactly.
Brene Brown, who I'm reading the book, so you're gonna hear a lot. Brene Brown talks about how with studies that have been done on, well, there was it was like one of the first mass shootings in like Oklahoma, a long time ago. And the governor of Oklahoma was like, oh my gosh, we have to do something about this. I'm putting all the money in to find out why this happened. And so they started doing a bunch of research on like mass killers and murderers and da-da-da. And one of the things that they found that was similar throughout all of them is a stifling of their creativity. Like they weren't allowed to explore the aspect of creativity. And what they find is that doesn't, when you stifle your creativity, it doesn't just mean you get antsy and less creative. It comes out in negative ways.
Yeah,
it comes out in very positive ways. I'm not saying that comes out like everyone's out. If you're not being creative, you're gonna go murder a bunch of people. Right. But I think this is an example.
There are destructive life, choices that you make. I mean, you can overdrink, you can get overuse drugs, you can get into risky behaviors that can be really destructive to you and to others. So I think it's really critical for us to sort of again drop into the body and bring out this thing within you.
Ooh, drop into the body. That's like taking account of who you are. And like
yeah.
I'm a big believer that like, and this is my religious background, right? Where it's like, I believe that I was created by a perfect being, right? Who doesn't make mistakes. And my whole life, I looked at this creation this being had made, and I was like, what a mistake. What a mistake. I got to fight this thing.
I know.
And finally there came a point when, in my journey of trying to find out, man, what's wrong with me? Or like, how do I fix this? Where I distinctly had the most I was praying and I had this feeling that like, why are you fighting what I made? Why are you like, do I make mistakes? Yeah. And I was like, no. And it was like, then why are you fighting it? Why are you treating it like one? And I was like, oh man, like what a slap in the face, right? Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, like let me change that around. Yeah. It marked the beginning of like a beautiful moment.
It is. It's your superpower. Right?
Yes.
Bring it forward, right?
And it's
worth
cool.
fighting for. It's worth getting up and making the effort to make a difference and an impact.
Yes. Okay. I want to ask you, and I don't want to, you got lives to save. You're like running around being a superhero, being the X-Men you are. Wait, which X-Men would you be?
Oh my gosh.
Charles Xavier?
Well, I mean,
Beast?
Clearly, no, it's Iceman because he's the gay X-Man, yeah.
Was he gay even in the comics?
Yeah, well, he's now, yeah. So.
But you would be Iceman?
Well, yeah. I mean, the power isn't really that, I think, conducive to romance, but it's very cold. But.
I wonder if this is like a study though, where it's like says something about us the powers we choose.
I know.
Oh man, who would I be? I think Morph. Did you know Morph? The one that could change into anyone.
Yeah.
That probably says something
That's
too.
Good.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I feel like we're like diving into something.
What would your superpower? If you could choose a superpower, what would it be?
If I could just choose a random one, or even like maybe one that feels like me in a sense.
Yeah.
I think I'd actually be like Morph. I feel like it's the ability
you do want to shape
Yeah, shapeshift. I feel like the ability, and I like that concept of like adjusting to my surroundings, and it feels really practical and useful and beneficial in like the day to day. So I would 100% do that one.
Okay, yeah. So Morph is kind of like probably a D-list X-Man. I would recommend Mystique, who is more of an A-lister.
What's the difference?
Lesbian.
Is she?
Yeah.
Wait, what's the difference between Mystique and Morph?
Well, Mystique's like a woman. Well, I don't really know what she is.
Well, I mean, like power-wise.
Power-wise, they can shapeshift. There's no.
Oh, but
right?
D-lister like popularity-wise.
Yeah.
I'll take Morph. So. Mystique, I don't want to be like blue all the time.
you can shapeshift however you want to be.
If she like sneezed and lost control, she would go blue again.
You're not going to lose control. Your A-list X-Men do not lose control of their power.
Imagine being on a first date, or you're like meeting your boyfriend's family, and you like turn blue on accident. Yeah, right. I don't want that.
I think we need to like work through that. So there's some like
I'll be any color but blue. I don't want it. Oh man, that's super interesting.
Okay.
And I feel like there's a lot to unpack here. I feel like this really like some psychology.
We're getting into nerdy comics.
And Morph. It's like cold and frozen and wants to be other people. It's like, what are we saying? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh man, but I like me.
Good. I like you too.
I want a story of a personal example of something a moment, and you've already shared a couple, but just to round it off, a moment where you've experienced, I would say, queer joy. A moment where you're like, in relation to your identity and who you are, where you experienced joy. Oh. And I am getting mad deja vu right now. Like, incredible.
Like we've been here before.
Like, I swear I dreamed of this moment, and it's like throwing me off a little bit. I'm like, ooh.
What brings me queer joy is... when I have engagement with people who maybe share a different ideology from me, maybe have a different sort of worldview, maybe have different politics than mine, and I find some kind of connection to them. And I see people shift out of a rigid space to a more open, fluid space.
Is there a moment you can think of?
Yeah. I've had lots of experiences with Republican lawmakers, for example, that have been really in a fearful position. And I remember one lawmaker who one time went on to Twitter. This is before. It's like a year or two before I became the head of Equality Utah, but I was sort of an activist. I was sort of running
sort
around
of an activist.
doing
You were the activist.
protests and things. Anyway, but a lawmaker had tweeted something. He made a transphobic joke on Twitter, dismissive, and then it was retweeted by another lawmaker, and then then all of a sudden it started blowing up in the media, and then all of a sudden it started making national headlines.
As like a shame on him?
People were outraged that this had happened. And that lawmaker, and Governor Cox was still a lawmaker at that point, and we all assembled a bunch of conservatives together for this big kind of cultural competency night, where we went around and they heard the stories of trans people in the room, and it was probably the first time that many of them had actually ever met a transgender person.
Oh, interesting.
And so it was a lot of, difficult emotions were shared. It was painful. But over the years, I've watched this lawmaker become not just a friend, but often an ally to us on various issues. And I've brought families of trans kids to meet with him, and he's always sort of welcomed them. And seeing his transformation throughout the years.
Is he still a Republican?
Yeah. Very conservative, but always willing to engage and give consideration to us. And I have that story with many conservative lawmakers who kind of shifted, and that brings me joy.
Do you feel like you've ever shifted in these interactions?
I don't know.
Or you feel like you've learned something, or you've had moments where you're like, oh, even if it's like inhumanity.
Well, that's the thing about all of this, is that I think effective advocacy is not about like changing people's minds. It's about building a relationship with them. Oh, interesting. And building friendship with them, and being willing to have the courage to ask yourself to reevaluate your own thinking. Ooh. Yeah. And not just assume that because someone is, for example, a Republican or a Latter-day Saint or whatever, that you know everything about them, right? Because the label can become very reductive. Right, and there may be a lot more complexity to who they are, and there may be more humanity than we're willing to give them.
Often there is, right?
Always is. There always is. And when we actually have the moment to sort of sit with them and learn from them as well, and respect them, then when we are willing to see their humanity, they are more open and willing to see ours. Oh. And that to me is effective advocacy.
It's like extend the respect you want.
And have a relationship and a friendship with them.
I think that's important. Yeah. Where it's like, in order to respect people, they don't have to do what you want.
Right.
They don't have to believe what you want. And that's really unrealistic and kind of weird to feel that in the first place. Yeah. But when it comes to human rights, I feel like that can be tough. So I think that's a really cool example. I did.
Yeah, and you have to be kind of vulnerable with that, and sometimes it backfires in your face. And I've had lawmakers lie to me and deceive me, and I've experienced all that. But I also don't want to be cynical and jaded, and because I don't think that it helps me move through the world. Yeah, it's good to be savvy, and it's good to be thoughtful with your engagement. But to me, it's really important to be willing to sort of build those relationships so that when there is a problem or an issue, you're the first person they come to.
Oh, interesting.
Because they know that you're not going to, shoot them down.
They know they can trust that they're going to have a conversation of
they can ask questions and you're not going to pounce on them. And that's the challenge that we have right now with social media is that everyone is so eager to be outraged.
Right.
And all the social media algorithms encourage outrage.
And you know what? I think it's like justified in a lot of ways to be upset.
Yeah. There's times when anger is an important emotion. But if you stay in that anger and you stay in that space, you can't get to constructive solutions.
Agreed.
So you have to be willing to sort of, when you pounce on someone, or if you attack or you pile on social media on somebody who has said something dumb, or something insensitive, and maybe even something just cruel. If you pounce on them and pile on, you might shame them into silence. but you haven't changed their heart.
I think about that a lot. It's like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
Because if you want to make positive change, that's not the same action that's going to lead to that as would just venting or showing frustration.
Right.
Because feel free to show your frustration, but me raging at you and shaming you is not going to help you.
It's
not going to change the dialogue. It's not going to be more supportive for more people.
Yeah, the amygdala. It's all about the amygdala, right? So that part of the brain that fires off into fight or flight.
It's like that lizard brain.
Yeah,
like primitive side.
Yeah. So if you perceive that you're being attacked, you will move into fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so you don't want a lawmaker or that you're trying to move to go into this defense posture, right? Or for them to aggressively come back at you, right? You want to be able to sort of help them drop those barriers down so that you can make this empathic connection with them.
Oh my goodness!
And then with that empathic connection locked, then you can start to have difficult conversations around policy issues that you're trying to move.
You know who does this well?
Who?
I'm gonna bring it back.
Yes, Andrew Garfield.
Andrew Garfield. Well, because I when I first met him, you'd already known him for a little bit. He was in Utah doing research for his show, the show that's coming out under the Band of Heaven, and I was very impressed because he worked so hard to understand the culture. He spent time in churches, at Sunday services, family home evenings. I was impressed, and he wasn't there to tell people what they were doing wrong. He was there to just like observe and listen,
absorb.
And I was like, what a great takeaway.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
I know.
Man,
he's gifted.
Troy, thank you so much for joining us. If I could just like recap what we talked about.
Andrew Garfield.
Andrew Garfield. That's first off.
The best Spider-Man.
He would not ghost or kiss Andrew Garfield. I do. He's kind of my favorite too. Tom Holland's great.
Yeah.
Tobey Maguire's there too. He was great last movie. But one thing I love is that you talked about how you experienced joy in your identity, that queer joy from bridging the gap. From like finding a chance to like listen to someone and then seeing like a shift in them.
Yep.
Especially because like a lot of your world is political and constantly fighting opposition and trying to make the community safe for other people. So you're like constantly in that space. I love that. Yeah. Bridging the gap. And it sounds like with that comes this understanding that like we really have to like work to understand people and see them if they're going to see us and understand us.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a takeaway?
That's it. That's my ethos with all this work.
What I miss. Yeah. What I miss.
No, you got it. That's kind of my passion about life. The thing that keeps me up at night is the way that our culture is fracturing and polarizing, and how we see the people on the other ideological side of ours not just as someone who is different, but someone who is our enemy. Right? And then when we see people as constant threats to us, then our amygdala is activated up, and then we are in a state of fight mode or flight mode,
and it just becomes counter.
And then it continues to fracture and fray. So what I love to do, and I do this with my family in Utah County, because I have cousins and aunts and uncles there, and who I love, and But they share a different faith than I do. They share different politics than I do. And what I find so helpful as kind of a spiritual practice is just to go spend time with them without the intention to prove to them that I am right and they are wrong.
Interesting. What do you do if they say something?
So if they start to flare up with things, which they want, like,
gays are crazy,
right?
Disease,
right? They usually like to go off on like Joe Biden or something, and I always shut it down gently and just say, hey, I know that we don't agree on this, but there's lots of things that we do, so let's figure out what that is.
Oh, interesting.
And then what I found is that when I never ever sort of go into, I never go, well, Trump did it, I never do that with them. And what I find is that when they recognize that I am not going to go after them, then they get more vulnerable.
They can ease up, let you in.
And then I found over the last few years is that we're able to have really interesting conversations about things that aren't polarized. They came in a couple years ago and they were really like, so tell me about these trans girls playing sports, and they wanted to attack me, and I wouldn't sort of take the bait with them. But now, when a couple of years later, as the issue has still been something that we've been working through, now I find that they're much more they're much more willing to engage the complexity of the issue and the nuance of the issue without being defensive.
Because of this.
Yeah.
Because you came in not to fight or attack or defend. You came in to listen and understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And so that's what, and it's hard. I'm not saying that any of this is easy.
Yeah.
That's why I joke that it's my spiritual practice is like, have dinner with my family because I'm learning how to, not be emotionally reactive when people say things, trying to sort of like, goad me a little bit.
Reminding our lizard brain that we're not in a fight or flight situation.
Yeah. And they're trying to provoke some kind of response from me. And if I can get to the point where I'm very calm, I can sort of breathe before I speak. That to me has been like a skill that I'm not always good at it, but I'm getting better at it.
I love that. And it's not like you're sacrificing your values or like refusing to stand up for for what you believe in. It's just this concept of going in to understand and listen.
Yes. And then the rest will come later. People are all on a journey and everyone's evolving on that path. And so where someone is today does not mean that is where they will be tomorrow or a month from now or a year from now. So allowing that people to have the space to kind of grow and evolve is really essential.
Well,
but the moment we shame them for not being where we are because we're on this elevated space, right? The moment
we have the car, we have the information they need.
Right. The moment that we shame them or blame them, then we shut down the opportunity for us to have real, genuine connections.
Ooh. And I love this too because it sounds like you have a pretty good relationship with this family.
Yeah.
It sounds like you found like these people that you could maybe look at as antagonistic at one point are now like a support system or like.
Well, I always presumed that they wouldn't want anything to do with me because I was, the sort of gay activist.
Yeah.
I let them
represent everything that they.
Right. And then I found that they would keep reaching out to me, and I kind of dismissed it because I thought, well, they're not really going to want to accept me.
Yeah.
But they always prove me wrong. Every time I'd go and sit down with them, they were always like, "Who are you dating?" And they're very they're very interested in my life, and they've been sort of following me on the news, and so they kind of like knew what I was doing, so yeah, they're very fascinated about my friendship with Andrew Garfield. It's
I mean, who's not? We have the tell-all for that, please.
We gotta keep coming back to Andrew. Yeah, and so again, you can't just assume that they're going to reject you or that they're just because they're Republican or because they're Mormon or because you don't know. You don't know until you have the sort of vulnerability to sit with them.
It's like a safety thing too.
Yeah.
It's like I need to make sure that I know what you're going to interact with me like, so I got to prepare myself.
Yeah.
And so if I see you with this Make America Great Again flag, I'm going to build a profile in my mind.
Yes.
And chances are it's going to be the worst profile I could come up with.
Right.
And chances are none of it's going to be like spot on.
Yeah.
Wow. What a shift.
So
I like
be
this.
willing to just interrogate that within yourself. That's what I kind of try to do.
Challenge your own beliefs that are maybe not coming from like...
Yeah. Allow people to be complex. I try to allow people to be complex. I try to allow people to be messy. I try to not reduce people to sort of labels.
Interesting.
And it's I'm not perfect at this, but it's a practice that I try.
It is, right? Yeah. Like we navigate our lives looking at these labels.
Yeah.
I love this. I want to like brand this episode as like, we should do it like the joy of, and this should be like the joy of, I don't know, like overcoming adversity or like, seeing through labels or something. We should come up with something fun for it.
The joy of Andrew Garfield.
And you know what? I think with that, I think we're good. Troy, thank you so much for coming. Where can people find you? What's a good place if people want to know more about Equality Utah or you in general? Where should they go?
Yeah, equalityutah.org.
Troy, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Stacey.